Good morning, officially, everyone. This is Human Touch from Interact Studio. I'm Lou Solomon. I'm so glad you're here with us today. This is our bi-weekly mini Zoom free series. We do it every other Thursday at this time, 11 o'clock. And our goal is to just enrich your day with some real conversation, informative, but also a little inspiration during a unsettled year, this 2021 unsettled year. Now, Jess is our interview host this morning. She does such a great job with it. She is our creative director, by the way, unless she's doing her gig at WCCB. She is the senior promotions producer there, and we just grab her up any chance we get because she keeps us looking good and just a ray of sunshine. We love Jess. Now, to set this up, I mentioned that the year is unsettled. We felt as though it's important to speak with people like Chad Henderson during this year about the perseverance to overcome the obstacles of pushback when you are an entrepreneur. And I'd love to see, Patrick, the slide on the entrepreneurial spirit. This is not just for startups, because there is a push within all of us that drives us to self-express. And that means and includes the thought leader. You can be a thought leader within the organization, a small business owner, nonprofit leader. My goodness, I know some entrepreneurs who are driven in the nonprofit sector, freelance individuals, a lot of folks doing freelance work, creatives, artists. There is only all of us when it comes to the desire to be free in our expression. And so that's what we're talking about this morning. We also notice that folks, entrepreneurs run on passion and excitement. That certainly is Chad Henderson. Risks the security of doing things the right way. I shared with everyone before we got started this morning, when I was dreaming of Interact Studio, I told a dear friend about it, Richard, who I remind this of today. And Richard said to me, "Now, Lou, what do you know about running a business?" Which that's the kind of obstacle you have to overcome sometime to be self-expressed and go your own way and do things a different way. Learning from failure, not turning around when things slide a little bit, never giving up. And certainly Chad Henderson is a person with the kind of perseverance to overcome obstacles to your true calling. This is what we're talking about, not a job, a true calling. And so, Jess, with that, take it away.
Well, hello, Chad, and hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. So, Chad, anyway, first, raise your hand or give us a little emoji if you have had a NoDa beer before. I'm sure a lot of you have at least heard of NoDa beer. Yep, same. I would like to have one right now.
I hope so.
Life as a brewer, it's not easy. It's taxing. It's physically demanding. The hours are weird. You have to keep some hours going with the farmers. Chad, tell us kind of about those early days of NoDa and overcoming maybe some of the haters who didn't think you could do it.
All right, thank you, and hello also to everybody there. It's definitely not as much of a sexy rock star job as a lot of people think it could be. I don't know, I'm only 23 years old, if you're not asking. I'm not. I'm saying it does definitely take a physical toll, though. The first early years that we were operating was a lot of physical and mental tolling, because we didn't really have a whole lot of people to lean on here in the Charlotte area that had done what we had already done. There had basically only been one currently still operating brewery at that time, being Old Mecklenburg, which was a great resource for us to touch in on. But there wasn't a whole lot beyond that we really knew exactly what the right way to do. We were just a bunch of homebrewers and enthusiastic beer people that really wanted to get something up and running that we thought had legs to stand on. And you kind of have to take, with which, like the slide just said, where you have to learn from failure. You have to think too that failure is not fatal. It only is if you let it stop your progression going forward. And every time you get a success, the success isn't final. Every time you make something go forward, you have to then look for the next thing to drive it forward and whatnot. And we kind of had that mentality because we really did approach this company. Myself, I'm a co-owner and the head brewer, and the two co-founders, there's a husband and wife team. We looked at it as there is no plan B. We have to do what has to get done. And that meant sleeping on the floor multiple nights of the week for the first, year and a half, 2 years, because we had to get stuff up and running or fix a problem early in the morning, or I was just there really late at night. I got to the point where I got rid of my cot that I used to sleep on because it was too comfortable and I wouldn't wake up at 2 a.m. to start doing what I had to do. Or if I only had 30 minutes, I would sleep through the alarm. So I would just take clothes that I had to change into and lay my head on the pile of clothes and put my phone that would go on the alarm on my chest so that it would vibrate and wake me up. Doing stuff like that, working over 24-hour shifts, when it had to get done, all those sorts of things happen because you don't really know how to approach this next thing, but you believe that the thing that you're trying to do is worth doing, whether it be doing our first bit of canning, doing our first types of multiple batches during the day to try to meet volume demands and whatnot, or try to do a new process that we hoped would go one way, but it would go completely south. Like all those sorts of things, that you're not sure of, that can be daunting and honestly pretty high risk. You kind of have to just say, like, it doesn't matter what the risk is. Like, as long as, we're able to still kick through it and push through, we're going to do what we have to do for it. And I think that I wanted this position. I wanted this career so badly that I kind of felt like I was obligated to do the worst of the worst to prove that I wanted to do it. So when it came down to building out the building itself and working with really minimal contractors and doing things I've never done before, especially in construction and sledgehammering stuff from the moment the sun came up to the moment we couldn't see what we were slinging sledgehammers against, like all those sorts of things. I felt, it was extremely tolling, but at the same time, I felt I was earning the honor of being able to be head brewer of a project that I really felt had a lot of momentum going forward.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize the physical work you did in actually physically starting NoDa Brewing. Like, we know that you're the brewer, but you actually were on the floor getting the building in order and all of the tanks and everything from the get-go.
Yeah, it was a all hands on deck pretty much for the entire thing. And a lot of people think that we're a really large company now, and I guess relative to the area, we are a large brewery. We have over 60 employees now, but we started out with 6. And that included our bartenders and sales staff and co-owners and we had to do everything pretty much on our own to try to make it fit in the budget to start out with. And it was a huge physical toll, and it's all the stuff that we'd never done before. We never moved tanks that are 20 feet tall around, just trying to figure out how to move them into a slab and whatnot that we had just laid a couple days prior to. So there's a ton of things you kind of have to learn on the fly, but if you're willing to dig deep and do what it takes to get it done, something that you hope takes an hour might take a day, but ultimately if it gets done, it gets done. And that's the satisfaction, knowing that like you now learned that thing, and now the next time that happens, maybe you can make it happen in an hour or 2 hours or some fraction of what you had to do. But you have to constantly learn those things in building a company out. It doesn't only fit just for a brewery that takes a lot of physical toll to get it done. It's any sort of company that if you believe in what you need to do and what you can contribute to it, and you don't have all the know-how on how to work it out, you just pull from every resource that you can to get it done. And I think that flexibility and that learning potential applies to once you are up and running and whatnot. Because one of the biggest things, especially in the craft beer industry or any industry where it's kind of have a high level of evolution to it, you have to be able to change with what every season or whatever year is putting out there. Like you have to be able to evolve what your company puts out so that you stay relevant. We're coming into 10 years right now, and we are still growing and still developing one-off brands that people get really hyped about, and we're winning awards every year and whatnot that are for different brands that we come out that are brand new. We won Great American Beer Festival medal this year for our Maibach, and that was the first Maibach I ever brewed, even as a home brewer. I had never brewed one before, and it's just, you have to take lessons learned and apply them, and hopefully reap the benefit from it.
Were there some unique lessons that you learned over the past year dealing with COVID-19 that have stood out to you that you felt like, oh man, that was a hard one and I overcame it? Like it was tough. It's been tough for a lot of breweries, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's been really tough I mean, just about every industry has had a really hard time, whether from being overtaxed or not being able to do what they need to do. With us, the most frustrating thing was that it was so many rapid alterations on what we were allowed to do, what was considered safe, what was considered not safe. We were very fortunate that we were considered to be an essential business because we were still considered in like grocery providing. Because you got to get beer and bread in there, but we had to still adjust how we did everything and the social distancing and every sort of safety precaution that we had. But then it would change to our tap room couldn't operate. Now that was a major event that we had to adjust and pivot. I know pivot gets used a ton and whatnot, but we had to adjust how we ran things and change things to a drive-through only. And I think the biggest lesson I learned through all of it, because there were so many strange alterations that happened, and our business is about 50-50 kegs and cans. And then overnight we had to then push to 98% cans and 2% kegs because so many restaurants had to shut down. So that was a huge adjustment to how we scheduled everybody, how we staffed everything, the amount of time, how we were going to try to plan our brewing schedules. The biggest lesson I learned from all of it is that when obstacles present themselves, you have to treat it as opportunities to succeed at them, as opposed to an obstacle. So if you look at things that come into like, hey, business isn't going to be usual anymore, and this thing is thrown into your lap, instead of thinking of it like an obstacle that stopped you from being able to do it, you have to look at it as an opportunity to see how you can get creative to still succeed in what you're trying to pull out. And sometimes that it takes more of a climb to get over it, and unfortunately it depends on the situation. But I think that mentality that's been more of a reassuring mentality than any other lesson, I think, so far as a company in general, is to realize that when things don't go the way you want them to go, it's not a time to panic. It's a time. We have a fundamental that we use over here that's don't focus on the problem, focus on the solution. So when something happens, it's like, all right, this is going on. What are we going to do to get to where we need to go on it, instead of focusing on this thing that's negatively affecting us?
Right. So applicable to any job, not just, brewing in the restaurant industry.
Absolutely.
So, did you grow up with this dream of becoming like a craft brewer, or is this something you worked on in college? Tell us a little bit about your background there and what was the catalyst for you becoming a brewer?
I always joke I did extensive research in college for it. I didn't drink at all until I got to college, and I had no interest in alcohol until I was in college, or how alcoholic beverages were made. Both my parents were still are don't drink at all. So we grew up in a world where it really wasn't a factor in it. And when I was in school, I started to, enjoy alcoholic beverages and whatnot, but I never really cared anything about beer. And beer, to a college kid's perspective, is just kind of like the cheaper, weaker soda-y sort of version of alcohol. And I didn't really think of it as anything more than like, it's made in a factory just like any sort of soda is or anything. I didn't really think of it as anything in particular. And then the Pop the Cap initiative happened in 2005, I believe it was. And I was in the middle of school then. And Pop the Cap basically was before Pop the Cap happened, North Carolina couldn't produce or sell alcohol or beer beverages that were above 6% alcohol, which if you look at, popular styles, like the most popular style for craft beer, at least in the United States, is IPA, which is 6.5% and over on average. So like a lot of craft breweries couldn't really stretch their legs, and a lot of breweries that were coming to the state basically weren't available. So they changed that law from 6% to 15%. And then all of a sudden there's this large influx of all these different craft breweries being available. And I would go to these, tastings where my friends would bring some over from out of state. And I was used to just, your typical Budweiser, Miller, Coors, I joke is like the carbonated, cold, flavorless type of beer. But I would have some like, here's this imperial stout or this breakfast stout. I'm like, why is it black and smells like coffee. And I'm like, what does that mean? And they're like, it's more expensive and harder to get. I'm like, that's not a definition, but I actually like this. This is actually kind of cool. And when these new brands started coming in, I kind of fell down the rabbit hole of like, this isn't just simply a thing that's mass produced. This is a thing that has a story to it. And the styles themselves, which there's a huge amount of style variations out there. They all have these cool historical stories to why they are what they are. And then the brewery's interpretation of it can be something from the brewer's personal perspective, or a thing with their town or with their company or a charity and things like that. So there's all this huge amount of story and art that was put into these beers that you could taste the intent and everything like that. And I just fell in love with the idea that you could use this medium as an artistic expression. And my dad was a professional entertainer, musician. And I've always loved music and I've always dabbled in it, but I've never had like the talent for it. I never had the talent to do. I always wanted to artistically express something. And all of a sudden I started looking into how he made beer. And I was like, this is not just like mixing a cocktail, because I had kind of like gotten into craft cocktails around that time. This isn't add one thing and two things to shake it. No, this was the whole fermentation process using naturally occurring ingredients that you can kiln and use these different varieties of hops, and there was kind of like no limit to what you could do with it. And I was like, this is something that is way more nerdy than I was expecting it to be. And being in a medical science background, was sort of what I was studying for, it just kind of shot right up my alley, with working with bioscience with it and fluid dynamics and things of that nature. And I started helping some friends homebrew, and I was like, this is it. Like, I want to do this. This is everything I want in a job, because I get to artistically think of something that can be consumed by someone else, literally, not just like consuming it from looking at something. Like, you can literally consume the artistic intent. You can have the physical interaction with it, so you're having a physical stimulus at the work. You get to do mathematical and chemistry, problem solving with it, and logistics problem solving. So you have, a further, mental stimulus with that. And then you get to have this great social outlet that, in itself, the product is a social lubricant, so to speak. So I was like, that's everything I could want in a job. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm getting ready to graduate with a medical degree in like 2 weeks. And so I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get into this thing. So yeah, so I went into the medical field, but with the full intention of using any avenue that could, present itself to me, to get into the beer world, hopefully, into the production side of it. And I spent the next several years spending all my free time pursuing that.
You talked a little bit about how your parents inspired you in their careers, and I know your dad had a unique career. Can you talk a little bit about how he's been an inspiration for you?
Yeah, my dad was the best. He really was. To the present, I couldn't really drink anything at all. I told them that I wanted to be a brewer, and they saw that I had the energy that my dad did for his profession. They were like 100%. They didn't understand anything about it. They were super supportive, and the whole way through was one of the nation's top Elvis impersonators. So there's that. He had a full 15-piece band. He's also credited with being one of the first 5 Elvis tribute acts in the world. So I spent my whole formative years traveling around with my dad, working shows with him, and occasionally playing little bit parts on and stuff like
that. Uh-oh.
Did we lose him completely?
I think we lost him.
There he is.
No, there he is. Sorry, I don't know what happened. But yeah, my dad always said that he, on stage, it's never a job. He does it because he loves it. And he, that was the main source of income for our family, and he worked himself, to death with it. And he had such energy in what he did, and he got known in, certain circles really well from that. And I always kind of felt like I would love to do something like that, but I don't think I could do the Elvis thing all that well. And I definitely can't sing,
Did we lose him again?
I think so.
Oh
dear.
Well, one thing that if we have lost him, I know that
Coming back.
we had a couple of comments that I thought were really interesting. You know, all small businesses have to go through chaos to get where we want to go. There's Chad. Are you there?
Yeah, but for what I was trying to say is I'm very lucky that I found something that I could actually put my thumb on, this being like, that's the thing I want to do. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily get that, especially in the early 20s like I did. But I think that it's never too late to start feeling completely empowered and impassioned to do something either, for that matter. And the efforts that, I still put the same amount of effort in today as I did then. You still wake up at midnight a lot of nights to come in to start a shift at 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And if anything goes south, which luckily we have it down well enough now that it's horrible things don't happen on the opposite where I need to sleep over or whatever. But if we have to stay late for something, if there's a thing that comes up, it's going to get done, and it goes without question, and it goes without, even a second thought. It's like, this is our baby. We have to do what we have to do to make sure it's safe and make sure that it goes forward. And I'm very lucky that I got to have a passion for something like that. To push that sort of effort out of it, because if I didn't have that passion, it just wouldn't be there.
Yeah. So what we kind of are hearing it for the passion that you speak with everything, but what matters most to you when you wake up in the day? What's the first thing that comes to mind that matters most to you?
Oh, that's for the business or just in life in general?
Both. What drives you?
I think the thing that makes me the most driven right now when I wake up first thing in the morning is that I want everything I do in the day to try to bring as much positivity to the things that I have interaction with. But basically, I want all the efforts that I put in the day to make sure that it betters the company's existence, my existence in proxy to it, and that my positive results from it affects my wife and our house's positive results. I want to come home not feeling like I've just like beaten myself to death, but like I beat myself up for something that was actually worthwhile, and I'm excited about something that's coming out, and that brings a positivity back home as well as for our household and whatnot. And as long as there's that, and that she and I are safe, then I'm happy. And that's the only things I'm really worried about when I wake up.
Well, I think you have overcome this Zoom and the difficulties, persevered through the obstacles of Zoom. Yeah. We did have a question. Valerie asked, how hard was the alcohol approval process in North Carolina?
The alcohol approval process isn't that bad when you're going brand to brand. It's when you cross states that it's really hard. Getting the initial ABC licensing is kind of just a constant up and down thing. Our president, Susie, had to deal with that a lot. And the biggest problem that we had was getting city approval for build out on stuff. That was the hardest thing. And after that, we just kind of got in the habit of constantly getting approved for new brands and whatnot. And as long as you fully disclose any odd, non-typical products, like you're throwing coconut or chocolate or honey or something like that in it, they usually are pretty good with it. And as long as you stay in the right alcohol cap, if it's under 15%, then it's usually okay. The only time that it's hard, and it's really just more so the wait period, is when you go across state lines. It takes usually a little bit longer to get it approved there.
Yeah. Susie asked, would you be able to talk a little bit about some competitors who are also collaborators? I know you've done a lot with that now with the recent Queen City Brewers Fest release that you did. What are your thoughts there? I don't really think of other craft brewers as competitors as much as energizers and collaborator potentials. Like the rising tide rises on all ships or something like that. But basically, the more, if we were the only brewery in town, we would not be as good as we are. I could say that easily. The quality of brewers around here grows every single year. And there's an extremely fun and exciting and talented amount of people that I look forward to meeting and working with. But I also really love the fact that their creativity inspires creativity on us.
And we don't like to, I don't like to scalp ideas, but the idea is like, you know, that was a really cool thing. Let's put our own spin on this thing. Or someone, we could see something that we did that someone else did their own kind of take on. And I don't really look at it as like competing. I mean, like on in black and white form, yeah, we are selling the same products, competing for the same shelf space and stuff like that. But in reality, like, we are only pushing ourselves as hard as we can because the level of talent that we are working with is rising year and year and year, and that just makes us want to be better. And the Queen City Beer Festival thing was an awesome experience in general. I actually got asked by the organizer that to help make the base recipe for it, and we sent it out. And I was like, hey, you know, me and the head brewer over at Resident Culture, we worked together on it. We're like, here's the basic concept and go crazy with it. Let your personality flow. So the variety that came out of that, I think had like 48 breweries participating in just the greater Charlotte area. You know, that's kind of speaks to how cool this community is. And that's the thing too, even when we were starting up and there wasn't a lot of breweries immediately around, you could ask any brewery in any other state a question, and more than likely they get back to you with some sort of an answer, whether it be helpful or be the exact opposite thing of what you want it to be. Like the amount of assistance and, you know, tips that people give is never ending. So it's a great community.
I have a final, very tough question. This is the hardest one probably. Do you have a favorite beer you've brewed?
Right now, it changes like every couple of months, but right now, my kind of the year-round beers we do is probably Radio Haze, because that's our hazy juicy year-round IPA. Because I spent over a year trying to do R&D on it, and it has brought such a finer understanding of like really small microcosms of science in the industry that I knew were there, but very few people were trying to work with. So it just really broadened a lot of horizons, and we've come out with since the piggyback off stuff that we learned from it. So while I love them fairly, that because of the amount of work that went in before we finally put it through, really happy how it comes out.
Well, I think we can all now have a better appreciation for NoDa beer and just the passion. I know after having met you a while ago, I'm like, there is love in this beer and you can taste it. You work hard, you're passionate about it, it shows. And I think that's what helps bring a lot of success to the brewery.
Absolutely. I mean, and not just to ours, but to any good craft brewery. I mean, you know, it is about the story, you know. Brewers work their butts off and really go on a very thin line of basically barely making it to get something that they're really passionate about. And I think you can taste the efforts. Every beer might not be for everybody, but that's why you make a bunch of different ones, you know. And so, you know, the concerted effort of the entire industry is pretty uniform in that everyone really does pour their heart and soul out into it. And that's why they call it craft. I don't really put it in for like how many barrels you make a year or how much money the company makes. And if you can taste the heart and soul behind it, it's craft beer.
Awesome. Thank you, Chad. Thank you so much for doing this. And we're sorry about all the Zoom
Absolutely.
difficulties.
Listen,
I'm sure it was probably something and I appreciate you guys.
It's a part of our world today, isn't it? You know, the dogs barking and the kids doing the photo bombs and all of that. I have a dog snoring behind me right now, and I'm hoping that he's not, you're not hearing that. Oh, well, thank you, Chad. And thank you, Jess. You know, one thing Jess had said about you, Chad, is that you are you're a spokesperson for your community, and you've taught us so many things today that I did not know. And, you know, just leaving us with, that's why they call it craft beer. I thought, wow, there is such artistic expression and love, as Jess said, in the product. So thank you. Thank you. Okay, everyone. Well, please mark.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Please mark your calendar for March 11th, when our topic will be the new networking, and our guest is Stacy Cassio. I had to stop and slow down to say that. I've been calling her Stacio. So, Stacy Cassio, CEO of Pink Network, and we hope that you'll join us for that. We'll be sending you a note about it. But once again, thank you, Chad, and thank you, Jess. Thanks, everybody.